Hi, welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone is full of lunch and, I don't know, whatever else you want to be full of. Love, happiness, light. As we touched on earlier today, housing, especially in urban areas that have seen explosive population growth, has become a central issue for cities. One place that has been feeling the pinch is the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley. Google, which grew from humble beginnings in the Bay Area, has partnered with Lendlease to transform underutilized space in the Bay Area to address the crunch and also hope to unlock the community potential. Please welcome Claire Johnston, Managing Director, Lendlease for Google Real Estate Development, and Alexa Arena, Senior Director of Real Estate Development, Google.
Well, it's good to be here. All right, so Claire and I are going to go through a bit of what we're up to in the Bay Area. And probably I'll get us started with some slides just so we can context set, and then we'll get into conversation with one another. A little bit of background, because it's unusual to have Google sitting here talking about big urban development projects. As probably many of you know, Google has always really cared about workplace. And I think Larry and Sergey, in the very beginning, didn't think about real estate as really something that was more of a CFO role or a role where it was more about the mechanics. They thought about it as central to the culture. And so that set the stage for a series of steps in motion where in the Bay Area, we see areas that have, particularly in the more suburban areas, lots of parking lots. I think you heard from Thomas and saw some pictures this morning that embodied that. And where San Jose as a city is this phenomenal city, but that doesn't have that energy of the central point quite yet in terms of density. And so we took the approach of saying, how do we help to think about evolving that workplace strategy on creating great user-focused, people-focused environments and move that into city making and into urban development. We knew we couldn't do that alone. We are not developers, hence why we went on a pretty exhaustive search and found Lendlease as our development partner. And so we'll get into that exciting venture to come. So with that context, we have 4 different districts, 2 in Mountain View. North Bayshore is the headquarter where you saw Charleston East and some of the Bayview and Charleston East pictures that came to you this morning from Thomas. And that's really where our headquarters are. That's where the Googleplex is. It's where we started. And we, for some time, have built over the last 5 years about 5 million square feet of office that's in production and happening on our own. Part of the reason we did that was, if you think of a 10-year lease span, you actually amortize about 80% of the core and shell expenses over that 10-year lease duration. And so we were pouring a lot of money into leasing, but we had these huge ambitions around creating 24/7 carbon goals where we're clean energy by 2030, or replenishing back 120% of the water back into the system. And we also have the social aspirations of adding housing, of adding more environments and social environments that help support our teams. And so North Bayshore is a representation of transforming kind of more of that headquarter approach into a true community that feels and has the spirit of that kind of human spirit of innovation. What I mean by that is we want the creativity to come out. We want it not to be all about Google. We want it to be about the history of innovation in the area and how we can take that and approach it as it relates to district systems, as it relates to housing, which Claire will share, and as it relates to placemaking. Downtown West is the San Jose project, which is our sort of more urban format. It's really about creating a central social district, which you'll hear a bit about, but it's all about responding to that cultural richness that exists in San Jose and bringing it to life. And Moffett Park, lastly, is really about how do we take the step of Sunnyvale's desire to create what was an industrial park and and move it into an eco-district. And we'll talk a bit more about that as well. And so in totality, it is millions of square feet of office, hundreds, about 20,000 residential units, about 1.5 million square feet of retail and placemaking uses, and lots of parks and open spaces. The land area is significant. So when I take those 4 projects and cover it over Lower Manhattan, it's hundreds of acres. So they're large-scale projects which give us the opportunity to bring about more dense, balanced, mixed-use projects. And so this is North Bayshore, of like really thinking about the heart of North Bayshore as a social place, almost like what you would experience if you went to Berkeley or Stanford or University Town. How do we bring in sort of the essence of nature and ecology that has actually been the City of Mountain View's mantra for a really long period of time? It's a government and a community that feels strongly about urban ecology. Likewise with Middlefield Park, creating that balanced mixed-use nature to it. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. And then with Downtown West, really thinking about how do you deliver a central social district. And why we say central social district is it cannot feel like Google's headquarters. It must feel like a genuine part of the city. And it also must meet the challenges of the cities and the downtowns of our futures, which aren't having lots of financial district-like office buildings and ivory towers, but are really about putting people first, making it mixed use so it's 24/7, and creating that humanity and access to nature that we all love. The last location is Sunnyvale, which is queuing off of the city's eco-district and really trying to push not just to a higher level of climate resilience, but also to a lifestyle, a way of life, making it easier for people to live sustainably and not just thinking about the physicality of the buildings themselves. So that is sort of the nutshell of what we're working on together. And I want to first ask Claire a question, because I know why we picked Lendlease, which, just to give a bit of background there, Google had a lot of these aspirations. We have a culture of user-focused, and we noticed, when you look out there in the development industry, it's hard to find that developer who thinks like that, who has those same aspirations and has executed on it. And Lendlease, I think, is, from my opinion, the best in the world around that. And so tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, why you decided to get into this crazy venture with us.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. And what's really exciting is that we are an international organisation, but we also have a strong presence in New York. And I've got lots of the team here, so hi, guys, and then a lot of our partners, because you never do anything on your own. So Lendlease has got over a 60-year history of doing large-scale developments globally. Mixed-use precincts, big, unused land, or disused, or land with no use, generally in urban cores. But the difference is that we normally do that with government. It's normally government surplus land, and we partner to redevelopment that. But of course, here's the once-in-a-generation opportunity to do that with a corporation, which I'm not sure anybody really has had the chance to do that with before. So for us, this is an opportunity to bring generational change to this particular area that Alexa's been talking about, but also to shape and refine and influence the industry overall. And the reason is scale affords you the opportunity to do that. And so for us, we know that the world needs to go to the next level of sustainable development, innovation. We need to tackle climate change, all of these things that we're already behind on, and the ability to do that with these great big areas and motivated partners allows us to be able to bring the best of our organisation to that endeavour. The other thing that's really sort of unique perhaps about Lendlease is that we are an integrated property development provider. So what I mean by that is we find capital. We're an investment manager, so we raise and manage capital. We also do development activities, and then we also build things as well. And so we can provide that sort of integrated sort of environment to Google, which is also helpful in terms of getting efficiency and realising quick outcomes. And I think you've touched on it before, but you did make a conscious decision to take this ground-up approach rather than continue on with leasing, which is really brave also. So why?
Yeah, and just to go back to Lendlease, why it matters that you're an integrated model for us is because these districts are all about the whole being greater than the sum of their parts. And so when you have that kind of integrating thinking and culture, you're just able to deliver such large aspirations. So, you know, as I talked about a little bit in the beginning, we care a lot about workplace. We know that social isolation is something, and well-being is something that we all have to pay attention to, especially in the coming generations. And so the environments that we need to occupy are just as important as the interior of the buildings that we're in. And so this gave us the ability to scale both our aspirations around environmental sustainability and around placemaking in a way that makes it a social home. And you don't do that with Google alone. You obviously do that through that blending of uses and through the way the place lives. So that kind of answers that question. But I'd love to ask you, you've executed that across the globe, and you have a couple interesting projects that you personally led. And so what are the big global lessons that you think are really important for both this portfolio, but just in general in the US?
Yeah, I decided early on that my career would be in real estate, and I just love doing development and at scale. And so I have had the privilege of working on a number of projects around the world, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But we do work Sydney, London, Milan, KL, and of course here in New York City, and all the way across the United States, all the way to Hawaii, Alaska, and other places. But we find that we've had, it's been a sort of a harder sort of journey in the US to find land that's available for redevelopment in this sort of really conducive ways to master planning and community. And we're finding that that is becoming more and more sort of important. We do positive place outcome projects. So what does that mean? It means we go into places where we know we have a long-term responsibility. We'll be there for the duration. We'll work alongside the community to understand what we're doing. And then in doing so, we think about and then create diverse mixes of places. Elephant and Park is a great example in the UK. Barangaroo is another one in Sydney. I worked on a 30-acre site in Melbourne in Australia called Victoria Harbour. And a lot of the premise for what we do is that when we start in a place, we know we're going to be there for the duration. And it's not really about recreating, it's about working with the fabric that exists. And you do that by listening and hearing and talking and working through the community across all descriptions. You listen, you hear, and then you respond. My best story ever was we were building a library in Victoria Harbour in Melbourne. And we were doing it in partnership with the City of Melbourne and Places Victoria, the state authority. And we sat down for a charrette with the community and a whole range of different stakeholders, and the librarians were there. And they said, you don't understand. You think you want a building with books and things. She said, we're the 007s of knowledge, right? And we just want to share knowledge. And the configuration of that library was informed by people who want music theatres and different ways of learning and education interventions. And so you create these civic spaces that endure and that the community resonate with by talking, and by not just doing it at the start, but by doing it through the duration of all of the activities, because the place is for those people, not for you as the developer.
Yeah.
So that's what we've been doing, and I know in Downtown West, that's been very much the conversation that Google have led in the planning process over there.
Yeah, we're excited to be. About a year ago, we finished out the entitlements for Downtown West, so now we're in the world of execution, which is really exciting. I think I've been in the development world for some time, and often being a developer is a scary thing in and of itself, and being a developer in a technology company coming into city making is even more anxiety provoking. And so in the beginning of San Jose, in the beginning of Downtown West, there was quite a bit of protest, concern that all of a sudden it was going to be Google, sort of big G, taking over the city. And I can really understand that anxiety, because that would be an extremely poor outcome. What we did is we said, let's take a step back and listen and have humility and try to understand some of those more complex issues that the community is worried about and the opportunities that we can only harness from them. And so we went on an In Conversation series, a listening series. We had thousands of meetings, lots of one-on-one meetings that our teams all did, including myself. Lots of really good, complex conversations. And this is sort of the moving from me to us in terms of the culture and how you approach communities, which can't be, I know everything on Google, obviously. It has to be an inquiry. And it has to genuinely then turn into a user-focused approach to how we think of architecture, to how we think of the ground plane, to how we think of a mix of uses, and to how we think of our public benefits and our ability operationally to have a project that is going to have great job training programs, that's going to build affordable housing on site, but also have the connectivity of how you can help the people in the affordable housing community likewise get into sectors like technology and be upwardly mobile. And so there's lots of layers to the way that we thought of San Jose, which really sort of came down to a strong social infrastructure layer, a strong environmental layer, and an ethos and a promise culturally that we would do this with the community all the way through. And so it would be an us versus me approach to development. And so we were fortunate to have Lendlease along that journey and helping us through that and think through that. And I know there's been many other opportunities that you've had in that regard, and would love to hear.
It's truly, it's easy to say, it's really hard to do it.
Yeah.
And again, generational commitment starts from the start. You have to stay for the duration. You can't just show up, because as we all know, when developments go bad, they go bad. And it's generally because people don't feel listened to. They don't feel that the community is heard, listened to, and responded to. They don't feel like architectural place creation is of the place.
Yep.
And it's really easy to get it wrong. And it's hard to get it right, but it's really the only way to go about doing things. And so you have to have commitment, and you have to have a partnership and a partner that is predisposed. And for us particularly, government agencies are generally very predisposed to what they need to do, because they are there to serve people. Corporations, perhaps less so as a mandate, other than the commitment that Google has made has been very strong. And so our job is to then say, how do we together realise that vision, and what is the process and the systems that we've learnt over 60 years that we can bring to that conversation. And a lot of it is around bringing every part of a development community together, right? It's your architects, it's your consultants, it's your engineers, it's your environmental scientists, it's everybody who plays a role, understanding what the mission is. What's the why, what's the mission, and how do you go about doing that? And so every conversation is this right for the community? Have we done what we need to do? What could we do better? How might we change things? And really adapting and changing, which requires flexibility, which is difficult when you're on a time frame. And so how do you sort of do that? And so it's really about the discipline, getting a framework in place to say, this is the ambition and this is how we will logically go through that, even though it is going to take us some time. So it looks like it's organic and evolved, but actually there's quite a structured thought process that goes into how you run through all of these things. And in many instances, like San Jose, Middlefield Park, Downtown West, for example, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting with a very deep history, a deep culture, a deep heritage. San Jose is constantly rated on the top 10 development cities in the US. And so how do you hold true to that ethos of listening to the community, delivering for the community, and you keep that via a system through the process? And so you're solving mutual goals together, and it's about a balance and a win-win, which particularly for me is what I love about the partnership that I've been in with Google, because it's not always easy, but it's always respectful and collaborative, and always with the best outcome in mind for the users, whatever class of people they may be. And so that's what I find is the most exciting about what we're doing, is that we're aligned in our values and our execution is complementary.
Yep, absolutely. No, as they say, culture eats strategy for lunch. So you can have the right strategy and the right vision and ambition, but if that culture isn't there for each of the different details to really come to life, it's just not going to make it. So, as we think about what does that mean for us as a community, and by the way, I love this forum and the creativity in it of all the people who are part of it. And I think for all of us, you need to start in each person, the capital has to come in and think in a more patient, long-term way. The next stage is you have to have a community process that's about listening, that's about engaging, that's about actually then taking those complicated problems and saying, how do I reflect a better way towards that end. The architecture should not be about the form. Beautiful buildings are easy to do. The reason we work with Thomas Heatherwick is, there's that human-centered design approach around it's about the ground and how that then lifts up into the architecture. The urban development has to be mixed use. It has to be thoughtful of how you're thinking about, retail not as just a transactional strategy, but really thinking about your ground plane as a source of bringing people together. So it has to happen at every micro detail and with an empowered team who then, create the whole. And so it's exciting to be able to do that with you all.
It really is, and it's important that you evidence it, because it's easy to say, hard to do, right? And so the ability to actually do what you said you would do is really where you hit the rubber of the road and you start to get traction and really become a force for good, and then be able to influence industry as we think about what we've been able to achieve at scale and with the resources behind us that certainly Google bring, and I like to think that Lendlease contributes to.
Well, good. I think that's about all we have time for today, but fun to be in conversation with you as always, Claire.
As always.
All right.
Thanks.